Hello and welcome. It is genuinely so great to have you joining us today.
Absolutely.
Whether you are listening on your commute or maybe you're making breakfast right now or you're just taking a quiet, much-needed moment for yourself, we are thrilled you're here.
It's the perfect time to just settle in.
It really is. And today's mission on this deep dive is something that touches almost everyone at some point in their lives. But we are going to look at it through a lens that might completely shift how you view your own mind.
Yeah, it's a completely different perspective.
Right. We are exploring the surprising, almost science fiction-like ways our brains, our physical bodies, and our deepest emotions process a second language.
But more importantly, we're going to figure out how you can actually use that cutting-edge science to hack your own learning.
Exactly. And bring a little more peace to your daily life while you're at it.
Because it really is a fascinating intersection of biology, psychology, and daily habit building. When we talk about language learning, we so often focus entirely on the mechanics.
Like the grammar.
Right, grammar. We think about vocabulary flashcards, verb conjugations, all of that. But the underlying mechanisms, what is actually happening inside you when you acquire a new way of speaking, are profoundly physical
Yeah.
and deeply emotional.
And to really get to the bottom of this, we have an incredibly diverse stack of sources to guide us today.
We really do.
We're pulling from this fascinating Wikipedia article on a concept called embodied bilingual language.
Which is mind-blowing on its own.
It really is. And then we've also got our hands on a brand new, highly detailed quantitative academic study. This is from 2025 out of Nakhchivan State University in Azerbaijan.
Looking specifically at classroom emotional atmospheres.
Right. And to make sure we keep all this high-level science grounded in your actual day-to-day reality, we are integrating highly practical transcripts from 3 excellent YouTube channels.
The Cozy English, English with Altaf, and English with Podcasts.
Okay, let's unpack this. How does learning a second language literally rewire our physical and emotional connection to the world around us? And how can we use simple 5-minute daily habits to actually master it?
Well, to really answer that, we need to take a bit of a journey.
Okay.
We are going to start at the absolute microscopic level, looking at how the motor cortex in your brain physically activates when you hear a word.
Wow.
Yeah. And from there, we'll pull back and look at the social environment, specifically how emotions act as a filter for knowledge in a classroom setting.
The emotional filter.
Exactly. And finally, we will travel into the personal, quiet spaces of your own daily routine to see how you can reshape your environment to make all of this work for you.
I think starting at that microscopic level it's really the only way to truly grasp how wild this science is.
It sets the stage for everything.
It does.
Yeah.
So the Wikipedia article we're looking at introduces this concept of embodied bilingual language, which researchers sometimes refer to as L2 embodiment.
Right. L2 meaning your second language.
Second language, exactly. And to illustrate this, there is an example that I just cannot stop thinking about.
The writing example.
Yes. So I want you to picture a native English speaker who is taking notes in a class. They are learning Spanish as a second language. Suddenly, they hear the Spanish word rápido.
Which means fast.
Fast, right. And without even consciously deciding to do it, without a single thought crossing their mind, their hand physically starts writing faster.
It's incredible.
The meaning of the foreign word immediately bypassed their conscious thought and translated into a physical, bodily action.
And what's fascinating here is why this matters so much to our understanding of the human brain.
Why does it?
Well, in our first language, our L1, the theory of embodied cognition posits that word meaning is fundamentally grounded in mental representations of action, perception, and emotion.
So it's not just a dictionary definition.
Exactly. It's not just an abstract concept floating in a void inside your skull. Think about how you learned your native tongue as a child.
You're just interacting with the world.
Right. You didn't read a dictionary. You grabbed things. You fell down. You cried. Research actually shows that people comprehend sentences significantly faster if they're simultaneously shown pictures that match the action in the sentence.
Because the brain is simulating it.
Yes. Your brain is mentally simulating or imagining the physical action in order to understand the language. It is a full-body experience.
So the massive question L2 embodiment asks is whether this automatic, deeply physical connection happens with a language that you learn much later in life.
Past that critical childhood period.
Exactly. Do we feel our second language the way we feel our first?
And the research points to some staggering physical reactions in the brain.
The motor cortex stuff.
Yeah. In your first language, when you hear leg-related action words like kick or run, it physically stimulates the specific part of your motor cortex that controls the physical motions of your legs.
It's almost as if your brain is getting ready to run just by hearing the word.
Exactly. And similarly, hearing words like punch or throw activates the motor areas that control your arms.
But there is a really interesting boundary to this, right? The stimulation of the motor cortex only happens when those words provide a literal meaning, not a figurative one.
That is a crucial nuance. If you say kick the ball, the leg's motor area lights up. But if you say kick the bucket as an idiom for dying, it does not have that same direct sensory motor stimulation.
The brain knows the difference.
It's smart enough to discard the physical imagery when the meaning is abstract. But applying this to a second language is where the science gets really profound.
Because you're learning it later in life.
Right. As an individual's exposure to their second language increases, the sensorimotor involvement in the brain becomes progressively stronger. The research explains that L2 motor systems initially have to call on and borrow from your L1 neural networks to process the action.
So, if I'm learning the Spanish word for run, my brain initially has to use the English pathway for run to make my legs feel it.
Yes, it bars the old highway. But with consistent practice and exposure over time, those neural networks for the second language become just as prominent and robust.
You build an entirely new physical highway in your brain.
Dedicated just to that second language.
Which brings us to the big debate in the scientific community about how the brain is actually managing all this traffic.
The three competing models.
Right. The sources break down three competing models trying to explain this precise brain behavior. And I think it is worth exploring each of them because they offer very different perspectives on how our minds organize reality.
Where do you want to start?
The first one is called the Revised Hierarchical Model, or RHM. From what I understand, this model suggests that translating a word from your second language back into your first language is much faster than going the other way.
That is the core of the RHM.
Yeah.
Basically, the lexical links, the mental bridges between the words themselves, are bidirectional, but they are heavily weighted towards your mother tongue.
It's like a toll road.
Exactly. Think of it like a toll road,
Yeah.
where the lanes heading back to your hometown are always clear and fast, but the lanes heading out into the new territory are a bit congested.
That makes a lot of sense for beginners.
But the key for the RHM is that the semantics, the actual deep meanings of the words, transfer equally. So under this model, the embodiment effects, that physical feeling of a word making your muscles twitch, should theoretically be absolutely identical in both languages once you reach that semantic level.
Okay, so that is the toll road analogy. But then we have the second model, the Extended Bilingual Interactive Activation Model, or the BIA plus model.
This one takes a slightly different approach.
Right. It argues that your brain activates both of your languages non-selectively when you recognize a word.
The BIA plus model is fascinating because it views the brain as an incredibly ordered, sequential machine. It argues that the process happens in three distinct rapid-fire stages.
The orthographic, phonological, and semantic stages.
Yes. First, the orthographic representation activates. That is the spelling or the visual shape of the word on a page. Then comes the phonological representation, which is the sound of the word. And finally, the semantic representation, the actual meaning, kicks in.
So if we use the Feynman technique here to break that down, it's kind of like seeing a person across the street.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
First, you recognize the shape of their face. That's the orthography. Then you hear them call your name, and you recognize the sound of their voice. That's the phonology.
Right.
And then finally, you remember all your history with them and what they mean to you. That's the semantic meaning.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. Now, if you use your second language less frequently, this whole three-step activation process is slightly slower.
Because you're out of practice.
Exactly. But the BIA plus model argues that this delay is minuscule, barely perceptible. And just like the RHM, it assumes that because you eventually get to that full semantic meaning at the end of the sequence, the physical embodiment is fully maintained.
But science is never completely settled,
Def.
and there is always a contrarian view. This brings us to the third model, the sense model. This one kind of throws a wrench into the whole idea.
It really does.
It essentially argues that the words in your native language just have a greater number of semantic senses attached to them simply because of your lifelong exposure.
Right, because you have lived with those words for decades. Your mental representations of second language words are considered less rich.
And because they are less rich, the sense model argues that L2 embodiment, that automatic simulation of the word in your motor cortex might actually be minimal.
Or maybe completely lacking altogether.
Wait, hold on. If the sense model says L2 representation is less rich and might lack embodiment, how does it account for the Spanish student writing rapido faster? Or the motor cortex lighting up when advanced learners hear action words?
That is exactly the friction point in the current research. The sense model represents the skeptical side of the scientific community.
The skeptics.
Right. They would likely argue that the rapido example, or the motor cortex activation, might be heavily dependent on the learner's proficiency level or the specific context of the experiment, rather than a universal rule.
So it's not a guarantee for everyone.
They argue that until an L2 speaker has lived a full life in that second language, experienced deep grief, immense joy, physical exhaustion, the words remain somewhat two-dimensional compared to the 3D reality of their mother tongue.
Wow.
It is an active debate, but it raises a profound opportunity for the listener to do a bit of self-reflection right now.
Yes, think about your own language journey for a second. When you speak or hear a word in your second language, do you physically feel it the way you do in your native tongue?
Does the foreign word for run make your muscles twitch with the same subtle readiness?
That question of feeling a language is the perfect bridge into the next layer of what we need to discuss. We have looked at how the physical body reacts, but let's look at the emotional mind.
The emotional filter.
Right. The source material points out that emotion words in your native language are embedded in an incredibly rich semantic network. And that network is intimately linked to your conceptual and emotional development from when you were just a child learning to regulate your feelings.
Which brings us to this highly compelling concept of disembodied cognition in a second language.
Disembodied.
We just talked about physical embodiment, but emotional disembodiment is where things get really interesting. Research shows a demonstrable phenomena. Bilingual individuals often show significantly less emotion when they're using their second language.
Less emotion. How does that actually play out in real life?
It actually provides measurable cognitive benefits. When making complex decisions in an L2, people experience less decision bias and less framing bias.
So they're more logical.
Exactly. They are acting more rationally and less emotionally. The context the source provides is really illuminating here. Speakers are measurably less impacted by highly anxiety-inducing words when they hear or speak it in their second language.
Like the word death, for example.
Right. Take the word death. L1 speakers have a visceral, anxious reaction, a spike in their heart rate. But L2 speakers with lower proficiency don't experience that same physiological spike in anxiety.
Why does this happen? Is it just because the word hasn't sunk in yet?
It is deeper than that. The prevailing theory is that speaking a foreign language effectively releases the speaker from the heavy social norms, the historical limitations, and the ingrained political correctness that are permanently imposed by their mother tongue.
Wow. Okay.
When you speak your native language, every word carries the baggage of your upbringing, your culture's expectations, and your past traumas. But when you switch to a second language, you are essentially operating with a slight emotional buffer.
An emotional buffer. I want to spend a second on that because it makes so much sense.
It really does.
If you and your partner are arguing and you switch to your second language, you might actually be able to discuss the issue more logically because the words don't carry the same sting.
Right.
You aren't getting triggered by the specific phrasing that your parents used when you were a kid.
Precisely.
No.
You are utilizing the disembodied nature of the language to maintain cognitive clarity. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this idea of emotional distancing and emotional buffering is fundamentally tied to how we learn in a social setting.
Like a classroom.
Like a classroom. The emotions we feel or don't feel dictate what our brains are willing to absorb.
Which leads us to a foundational concept in language learning. Stephen Krashen's affective filter hypothesis, which he proposed way back in 1982.
A classic.
Krashen argued that things like anxiety, motivation, and self-confidence act together as a psychological filter. If your filter is low meaning, you are relaxed, motivated, and comprehensible input flows right into your brain and gets acquired.
It just absorbs.
But if your filter is high meaning, you are stressed out, terrified of making a mistake, or unmotivated, that filter acts like a brick wall, blocking the language from ever truly taking root.
Krashen's theory has been the bedrock for decades, but modern researchers like Diwali and McIntyre have refined it beautifully.
Oh, so?
They contrast two massive forces in the classroom. On one side, you have foreign language anxiety, or FLA. They refer to this as the left foot of learning. FLA hinders your working memory.
It's the freeze response.
Yes. It is the feeling of being called on in class and completely blanking out, even though you studied the material the night before. Your affective filter spikes, and the information is blocked.
I think everyone can relate to that. Imagine sitting in a high school French class, and the teacher is incredibly strict, maybe a bit intimidating.
We've all been there.
They point at you and ask you to conjugate a verb. Your heart rate spikes, your palms sweat, and your brain just shuts down. That is the left foot.
And on the other side, you have foreign language enjoyment, or FLE. This is the right foot. And it is crucial to understand that enjoyment isn't just the absence of anxiety. It is an active, positive force.
So it's not just feeling neutral.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
The research shows that FLE broadens your thought-action repertoires. It makes you willing to play with the language, to make silly mistakes, to experiment. It builds deep psychological resilience.
Which finally brings us to the brand new empirical data we have to share today.
The 2025 study.
Yes. Everything we have discussed so far has been theoretical or based on microscopic brain scans. But this study by Fatime Ismaili, published in 2025 out of Nakhchivan State University in Azerbaijan, puts hard numbers to this emotional filter.
The setting for this research is fascinating.
It is. They looked at 120 undergraduate students learning English as a foreign language. They are between the ages of 17 and 21, with 72 females and 48 males. This is raw, quantitative data on exactly how the emotional atmosphere of a room dictates human potential.
And the way they set this study up is actually really clever. They needed to quantify something as abstract as classroom vibes.
Right. How do you measure a vibe?
To do this, the researcher utilized two primary metrics: the Classroom Emotional Atmosphere Scale, or CES, to measure the positivity of the environment, and a short-form version of the Foreign Language Classroom Anxiety Scale.
Which we will just call the anxiety scale.
Right, to measure the students' stress levels.
And what did they find when they crunched the numbers on these 120 students?
The findings were stunning in their clarity. They found a very strong positive correlation of plus 0.67 between a positive classroom atmosphere and actual student engagement.
Wow.
In statistical terms, a 0.67 correlation is huge. It basically means that in almost every single case they looked at, as the warmth and supportiveness of the room went up, the students' willingness to participate, raise their hands, and engage skyrocketed alongside it.
That makes total sense. And what about the anxiety levels?
Conversely, they found a strong negative correlation of negative 0.54 between that positive atmosphere and anxiety. As the warmth of the room goes up, the fear measurably drops.
But they didn't just measure feelings and participation, they measured actual memory retention.
Yes.
And this is the part of the study that really stopped me in my tracks. They gave these students an unannounced, surprise 20-question quiz a full 6 weeks after a specific lesson was taught.
6 weeks.
6 weeks later, out of nowhere. And they found a plus 0.45 correlation between the students' scores on that surprise quiz and their perception of a positive atmosphere during the original lesson.
That is a critical finding.
It's incredible.
The data strongly suggests that positive emotions in the moment of learning might actually trigger dopamine release in the brain.
The save button.
Exactly. Dopamine isn't just a feel-good chemical. It severely enhances deep cognitive encoding and long-term memory formation. It acts like a save button for your brain. If the environment is positive and your affective filter is low, the information bypasses the brick wall, gets coded in dopamine, and is stored securely.
If you are happy when you learn it, you remember it better a month and a half later.
Yes.
And that biological reality plays out on the ultimate metric of the academic world, the final exam.
The big one.
The researchers split the students based on their perception of the classroom climate. The students in the high atmosphere group, those who felt highly supported, relaxed, and engaged, scored an average of 84.2 on their massive end-of-semester final exams.
Okay.
Now look at the lower atmosphere group, those who felt less supported, more tense, and experienced higher anxiety. They scored an average of 73.6.
That is a massive 10.6-point difference.
We are talking about a full letter grade difference. A student going from a solid C to a solid B or a B to an A, purely associated with the emotional climate in which they were learning.
But the study highlights a very specific mechanism here called the mediation effect through their regression analysis. And this is vital for anyone trying to apply this data to their own life.
What is the mediation effect?
The study proved that having a fun, relaxed class doesn't just magically, out of thin air, boost your test scores. You can't just put up colorful streamers, play some background music, and expect everyone to get an A.
Right. It's not a magic trick.
Exactly. Rather, A positive emotional climate creates engagement and lowers anxiety. It is those resulting behaviors, the willingness to speak up, the lack of fear when making a mistake, the deep focus on the task because you aren't worried about being mocked, that actually lead to the higher scores.
It creates the conditions for success.
The atmosphere is the soil. The engagement is the root system. You need the good soil to grow the roots, but the roots are what actually pull in the nutrients.
I want to talk directly to you, the listener, right now. If a positive, low-anxiety environment is definitively the key to absorbing a language, keeping that affective filter low, and physically retaining knowledge weeks later, how do you create that for yourself?
Most people are doing this alone.
Right. Most of us are not sitting in a university classroom in Azerbaijan right now. Most of us are learning on our own, squeezing it in after work or on the weekends. How do you take the classroom home?
That is the practical challenge. We know the neuroscience, we know the academic data, but how do we operationalize it?
And to answer that, we are turning to the highly actionable advice pulled straight from two fantastic YouTube sources, English with Altaf and English with Podcasts. Let's start with the first habit, courtesy of Altaf. It is called the 5-minute out loud routine.
Such a good strategy.
The steps are beautifully simple, almost deceptively so. You pick a specific time of day, you stand in front of a mirror, or just sit somewhere you feel completely comfortable. You set a timer on your phone for exactly 5 minutes, and you simply speak out loud to yourself in your target language.
The genius of this habit lies in its parameters. The source emphasizes the immense value of consistency over duration.
It's only 5 minutes.
5 minutes every single day is vastly superior to a 3-hour cram session once a week. Because we are talking about neuroplasticity, rewiring the brain, frequent low-stress repetition is the key.
And Altaf gives some very specific, approachable examples in the transcript. You don't have to debate philosophy. You can just say, today I woke up at 7, I brushed my teeth. Or you can introduce yourself. Hello, my name is Sarah, I live in Lahore.
It really doesn't need to be Shakespeare.
Not at all. You can literally just describe your room. The walls are white, I am sitting on a chair, I am eating eggs for breakfast.
And let's analyze why this works neurologically. This routine trains your brain to start thinking naturally in the target language. The source explicitly mentions that repetition is totally fine, especially in the beginning.
Because it builds the pathways.
Repeating the exact same basic sentences every day builds those physical neural networks. If we connect this back to the motor cortex activation we discussed earlier, every time you say, I woke up out loud, you are strengthening the connection between the language center and the motor cortex.
You are physically embodying the language.
Exactly.
And you are doing it in a completely zero anxiety environment. Your affective filter is virtually non-existent because you are the only one in the room. You bypass the anxiety of a real-time conversation with a native speaker, which allows the language to actually take root.
And Altaf also gives a brilliant tip: record your voice.
Oh, yes.
Doing this allows you to track your progress objectively over months, giving you a tangible sense of growth. When you feel stuck, you can listen to a recording from 3 months ago and realize how much smoother your pronunciation has become.
Which ties perfectly into the second habit, which comes from the transcript of English with Podcasts. This is a 5-minute morning challenge designed to actively stop mentally translating.
Mentally translating is such a hurdle.
We all know that feeling. It is the most frustrating part of learning a new language. Someone said something to you in Spanish, you translate it to English in your head, you think of your reply in English, you translate your reply back to Spanish, and then finally, painfully, you speak. It's exhausting.
And very slow.
Yeah.
It completely disrupts the flow of natural conversation.
So the podcast source offers a prompt to use during your 5 minutes, the what-if prompt. You just sit there and formulate what-if scenarios directly in the target language.
Oh, I like that.
For example, what if I finish my work early? I will go for a walk. Or, what if it rains today? I will stay inside and read. You force your brain to assemble the concepts without touching your native language.
To help facilitate this, the source adds some brilliant environmental hacks, things like changing your phone's operating language to your target language.
Everyone should do that.
Or physically putting sticky note labels on the items around your house. Writing fridge on your refrigerator, mirror on your bathroom mirror, door on your bedroom door. These seem like small, almost childish changes, but from a neurological standpoint, they are massive.
How so?
By forcing your environment to present the L2 vocabulary alongside the physical object, you force the semantic representations in your brain to map directly to the second language. You're essentially training your brain to bypass the L1 translation delay.
Let's look back at the Extended Bilingual Interactive Activation Model, the BIA Plus model we discussed earlier.
Right. Remember the sequence.
Orthographic to phonological to semantic, seeing the face, hearing the voice, knowing the meaning.
By putting a sticky note on the fridge, you are providing the orthographic visual shape of the word directly on the physical object. You are training your brain to increase the speed of that entire activation sequence.
So you are literally hacking the BIA Plus model with a sticky note.
You really are.
That is incredible. And honestly, it transitions us into the final and perhaps the most deeply resonant part of our deep dive today.
The psychology of growth.
Yes. We are going to explore the psychology of growth, the 1% rule, and the parable of the cracked pot. Here's where it gets really interesting, because we are moving away from the cold neuroscience and the academic data, and we are moving toward the emotional core of this entire discussion.
Using the transcript from a beautiful YouTube channel called The Cozy English.
The hosts of that channel, Emma and Daniel, have a conversation that I think will ring true for almost anyone navigating modern life, regardless of whether they are learning a language or not.
Absolutely.
Emma describes the modern condition of digital noise so perfectly. You wake up, and before your eyes are even fully adjusted to the morning light, you are reaching for your phone on the nightstand.
Right away.
You're checking messages, looking at social media, thinking about an email from your boss, catching up on the news. You are living for everyone else before you have even had a single glass of water for yourself.
It's exhausting.
She describes it as the feeling of being a guest in your own life. You are physically standing in your kitchen waiting for the kettle to boil, but your mind is 1,000 miles away, worried about a notification.
It is a profound state of chronic distraction and disembodiment. And I use that word intentionally. We talked about disembodied cognition earlier in terms of language, but this is a disembodiment from your own existence.
That's a powerful way to frame it.
To counter this, Emma introduces a powerful visual, the muddy water metaphor. Imagine your mind is a glass of muddy water. Throughout the day, every notification, every chore, every scroll on social media, every moment of anxiety is like a hand violently shaking that glass.
Just constantly shaking.
As long as it is being shaken, the water stays brown, cloudy, and opaque. You can't see through it.
But what happens if you just put the glass down?
That is the whole point. If you put the glass down on a table and just leave it alone for a few minutes, gravity does its work. The mud slowly sinks to the bottom, and the water at the top becomes completely clear. When you take 5 minutes of silence in your morning, not checking your phone, not studying vocabulary, not planning your day, just sitting, you are putting the glass down. Silence is an empty space. It is a vital reset button for your brain. It is the necessary condition for clarity.
But being still is so incredibly hard. Our brains are addicted to the shaking. And Daniel, the other host on the channel, talks about this trap we all fall into when we try to improve ourselves. The trap of wanting massive, instantaneous results.
We all do it.
You decide you want to improve your life, so what do? You buy 5 new self-help books, you buy an expensive gym membership, you vow to wake up at 5 a.m. every single day, and you swear you will study Spanish for 2 hours every night.
And by Wednesday,
You are exhausted, you feel like a failure, and you quit.
it is a guaranteed recipe for burnout. And this is where the 1% rule becomes so critical. Emma explains that real deep growth is quiet. It is not a massive overhaul. Instead of trying to change 100% of your life in 30 days, focus on being just 1% better than you were yesterday.
It's 1%.
The source uses a brilliant airplane metaphor to illustrate this concept. Imagine a massive passenger plane flying from London to New York. If the pilot shifts the nose of the plane just 1 single degree to the left, a movement so tiny the passengers wouldn't even feel it, their coffee wouldn't even ripple, that plane will end up hundreds of miles away in a completely different destination.
A completely different continent, practically.
Yes. Small changes do not look like much in the immediate moment. 5 minutes of talking to a mirror doesn't feel like fluency. But over time, those 1-degree shifts entirely rewrite your trajectory.
That's such an encouraging thought.
The source also uses a plant metaphor that I find very grounding. If you take a houseplant and dump 10 gallons of water on it in a single day, you will drown the roots and kill the plant.
You'll destroy it.
But if you give that same plant just a small cup of water every single day, it grows tall and strong. Learning a language or building any habit is the exact same mechanism. You cannot force the growth all at once.
That brings us to one of the most beautiful stories shared in the transcript, an old parable from India about a man and 2 water pots. The story goes like this. A man carries two large pots on a pole across his neck to bring water from the stream to his house every single day.
I love this story.
One of the pots is absolutely perfect. It never leaks, and it always delivers a full portion of water, but the other pot has a crack in its side. By the time the man walks all the way home from the stream, the cracked pot has leaked, and it only ever delivers half a portion of water.
And this goes on for years.
This goes on for 2 solid years. The perfect pot is proud of its accomplishments, but the cracked pot is deeply ashamed of its own flaw. It
Yeah.
feels like a total failure. Finally, it speaks to the man and apologizes, saying, "I'm so sorry. Because of my crack, I only do half the work. I am a failure."
And the man's response is the crux of the lesson. He smiles and tells the pot to look at the path they walk every day. He asks, "Did you notice that there are flowers only on your side of the path, but not on the other pot's side?" The man explains that he had always known about the pot's flaw, so he planted flower seeds on that side of the dirt path. And every day, for 2 years, as they walked back from the stream, the cracked pot had been unknowingly watering those seeds.
Just by being flawed.
Because of that crack, the man was able to pick beautiful flowers to decorate his table. Without the pot being exactly the way it was, flaws and all, there would be no beauty in his house.
The flaw was the very thing that created the beauty.
This raises an important question for all of us. How can we reframe our own flaws? We spend so much energy trying to hide our mistakes, trying to cover up our cracks. We feel shame when we stumble over a sentence in a new language. What if, instead, we asked ourselves, what is growing because of my struggle?
The host of the channel, Emma, gives such wonderful, specific examples of this. She says, if you are struggling heavily to learn English and it is taking you twice as long as anyone else, that struggle is building a profound level of patience inside you. That patience is a flower.
That's beautiful.
If you are naturally messy and disorganized, maybe it's because your mind is highly creative and constantly generating ideas. That creativity is your flower.
And to make this actionable, the source suggests a specific nightly habit. Every night, right before you go to sleep, think of one mistake you made that day. Maybe you mispronounced a word, or you lost your temper, or you forgot an appointment. Instead of beating yourself up about it, say this exact sentence to yourself. This is a crack that waters my garden.
This is a crack that waters my garden.
It takes the narrative of your day and changes it from a tragedy of errors into a story of growth.
That is something I am genuinely going to start saying tonight. As we synthesize everything we've covered in this deep dive, I want to tie it all together for you. We started at the microscopic level, looking at how your brain's motor cortex physically fires when you hear action words, literally changing your neurobiology and building new physical pathways.
We covered a lot of ground today.
We really did. We explored how you can lower your affective filter through a positive emotional atmosphere, proving through hard data that warmth and safety are biological prerequisites for deep memory retention and dopamine release. We looked at how to build daily 5-minute habits to bypass your internal translator and hack the BIA Plus model.
And finally, we learned how to forgive ourselves for our cracks, using the 1% rule to slowly water our own growth.
Learning a language isn't just about memorizing vocabulary lists. It is a full-body, deeply emotional rewiring of who you are.
It truly is a holistic transformation. And as Daniel and Emma reminded us, society loves to hand us a map that dictates what job we should get, how fast we should learn, what we should buy, and what success looks like. But you are the one holding the pen. You have the right to write your own true, slow story.
Which brings me to a final lingering thought I want to leave you with today. We talked earlier about disembodied cognition, the scientific reality that speaking a second language inherently distances you from your deepest emotional biases and the heavy social limitations of your mother tongue.
The emotional buffer.
Exactly.
Ah.
So, what if your second language isn't just a tool for travel or a line on your resume? What if your second language is actually the perfect safe space to finally confront and heal the personal flaws and anxieties you've been running from in your first language?
Oh, that's fascinating.
If you feel less fear in your L2, could learning a new language be the ultimate way to reinvent your relationship with yourself? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope it gave you some clarity, settled your muddy water, and inspired you to take just 5 minutes for yourself. Until next time, take care of your garden.